there are so many instances in which you would actually want to learn how to relax your pelvic floor muscles first before you entered into a training program to strengthen. The reality is, if you're having a disorder with your pelvic floor, if it's too tight or it's too loose, in both cases, it's weak. So you would think, okay, it's too loose. I need to strengthen it. Okay, well, that makes sense. I'm going to tighten this thing up, right? But if you have something that's too tight and weak and you go and you contract it more and more, you're just adding to the problem. You first have to teach that person how to get their pelvic floor muscles to a baseline and then tread carefully when it comes to learning how to lift and contract those pelvic floor muscles to gain back strength.
Welcome to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck, talking wellness and weight loss for real life. We're here to clear up the myths, misinformation, bad science, and marketing to teach you how to eat and how to cheat. Are you ready? I'm having salad with a side of fries. Hey friend, welcome to this bonus episode of Salad with a Side of Fries, brought to you in partnership with Kegel. I'm Jenn Trepeck, your host and health coach, here with you every week for wellness without the weirdness. Now, full disclosure, when I was introduced to what we're going to talk about today, I was intrigued. And then after trying it and meeting our featured guest, I now can't stop talking about it. So let's get right to it. I want you to meet her. She's a board-certified women's health clinical specialist physical therapist who's been practicing pelvic floor physical therapy for 19 years. She helped co-create the first smart pelvic floor exerciser, Kegel. She's currently head of clinical quality and education at Origin, the leading provider of pelvic floor and women's whole body physical therapy, and an assistant clinical professor for the University of California, San Francisco's physical therapy program. Kegel's design philosophy is that technology should make the world less complicated. And if you know my recently published book, Uncomplicating Wellness, you know that this is right up my alley. So please help me welcome to the Salad with a Side of Fries community, Liz Miracle.
Oh, thank you so much, Jen. I'm so happy to be here today. We're gonna have a blast. This is gonna be great. I'm so glad that you're already talking about this all the time. I was just on a call earlier today with someone where they said, well, is there anything you want me to know? And I said, just the more you can talk about pelvic floor function, the better, because it just gets more people to understand it and the awareness out there. So thank you.
Yes, no, thank you. And it's funny, yesterday I was actually at an influencer event here in New York City, and I said to one of the people there, it was like, I'm playing with this app, and now I'm getting into a whole tangent. We're going to fill all of you in listening, but I was like, she had the biggest smile on her face when I told her about it. So this is a topic. And to your point, I think if we hear about it at all, we hear about Kegels or pelvic floor as related to sexual health.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, it's really connected to so much more than that. It's about every body, not just women's bodies. And so this conversation deserves to be out of the shadows. Let's start with, what are some of the things that somebody might be experiencing that's an indication that focusing on their pelvic floor, doing Kegel exercises properly, I might add, could help them?
Okay. So I would start it out by saying you just want to make sure that you know how to do a Kegel exercise properly. I like that you kind of stopped on that for a moment, because a lot of people don't actually know how to do that properly, but there are a multitude of things. So if you're feeling like you are leaking urine, if you are leaking gas, if you feel like there is heaviness in your pelvic floor area, or something is bulging out, then strengthening those pelvic floor muscles are going to be able to address that. It can also be helpful for contracting around a partner or propagating an orgasm when it comes to sexual health. But those pelvic floor muscles support our internal organs in our body, which include our bladder, our uterus, and our rectum, and the people with the prostate as well. And they also support our musculoskeletal structure. So the function of our pelvis that all of our body sits on top of when we're walking and we're doing things from day to day. And it also acts as a sump pump. So it contracts and relaxes to move fluid out of the body. So if you're also experiencing swelling, let's say you just had a baby or surgery or something, and you've got swelling in that area, if you did some pelvic floor exercises, it could actually help to kind of get circulation moving in that area. That would be helpful for you.
So interesting. So what I'm hearing from you is, like we said, it's not just women, right? So for men, you mentioned prostate. I know it connects to ED or erectile dysfunction. as well, right? Is that also connected to that blood flow piece?
It can be, absolutely. Blood flow and also compression of nerves. So we have a main nerve that runs on both sides inside the pelvis. And I think that this comes up most of the time when people think about sitting on a bike seat and kind of that bike seat getting nestled up into the vulvar area or the perineal area and the compression that it can cause on those nerves. And then that can lead to erectile dysfunction issues like that. Yeah.
So interesting. And one of the things that we talked about too when last we spoke was this also isn't only for adults.
Right. So that was something really interesting that, I mean, honestly, I hadn't even thought about, when we created the Kegel, and we may need to give more backstory for listeners on what this device is, but there's an insertable device that you can insert into the vaginal canal and squeeze for strengthening purposes. We also created a companion device, which looks a little bit more like a bike seat. So I actually have, I don't know, people who can't see this, then it's not going to help them, but this is the insertable
Our members
version.
see it in video. Yeah.
Yeah, so that you would insert. And then this is the bike seat version that you can sit on top of. And I was at a conference in September, and one of the key speakers that came up was a pediatric occupational therapist. And she was talking about how children have pelvic floor dysfunction, which I know that I don't treat children myself, but I have a child, and issues that arise for them around urinary leakage or constipation, those kind of things. And you can't put a device like that in a child. In fact, you can't really even necessarily always do a visual exam or a palpation, like touching them. So giving them something that they can just sit on that looks like a bike seat feels really safe and non-threatening, and it can give you information about what's happening in their pelvic floor and can help them to train. So I thought that, I had thought of like, oh, this is great for people who don't have a vaginal canal and can't insert something, or won't because they have religious or cultural predilections that would make them not want to do that, or perhaps they're elderly or they have rheumatoid arthritis, right? There's something going on with their hands, so they can't insert it. And I thought of all of those things, and I didn't think of the pediatric population. And I thought that that was an eye-opening experience for me, sitting in the audience and have them talk about the device I helped create.
Right.
It's like,
Well,
oh my God, that's
and
great. You're using it for that.
Exactly. And the thing about that that's so interesting is because, constipation at any age can be a thing. And so especially thinking about that for kids, because there is this piece of, not wanting to go not at home.
Well, also, and if they have one bad experience with having a bowel movement, it hurts, right? Then every time after that, they don't want to have a bowel movement because they connect it with the fact that it hurt before. Somebody I know in my family who had this issue growing up, and it just kind of it's like cyclical and just feeds into itself, right? So you have to get them to get comfortable and actually relax the pelvic floor muscles. I would say constipation is one of the number one reasons that people go to the doctor. I'm sure you talk about, I don't know, do you talk about constipation?
Yes, we do.
And
We have
relationship to all of your nutrition and stuff?
Yes, for sure.
So it's a huge reason for people to go to the doctor. And people often think about nutrition or their gut motility, or do I have something wrong with my colon, right? But they're not thinking about the role that their pelvic floor plays in actually relaxing so that the stool can get out.
Yeah, which is so interesting because I also feel like anytime we're hearing a conversation about pelvic floor or Kegels, it's contraction. And what I'm hearing is that we also need to strengthen or exercise that relaxation piece.
Right, exactly. So that's why earlier when you asked me like, okay, so what are some exercises we would do for strengthening? Yeah, I had to kind of like pause and make sure that I was delineating the two in my mind, because there are so many instances in which you would actually want to learn how to relax your pelvic floor muscles first before you entered into a training program to strengthen. The reality is, if you're having a disorder with your pelvic floor, if it's too tight or if it's too loose, in both cases, it's weak. So you would think, okay, it's too loose, I need to strengthen it. Okay, well, that makes sense. I'm going to tighten this thing up, right? But if you have something that's too tight and weak and you go and you contract it more and more, you're just adding to the problem. You first have to teach that person how to get their pelvic floor muscles to a baseline, and then tread carefully when it comes to learning how to lift and contract those pelvic floor muscles to gain back strength. And that's one of the reasons, I helped create the Kegel, but one of the reasons I like it over other devices. And I will say too, the Kegel is not the only device I recommend for people. As a provider myself, I really pay attention to the person and kind of what's the best fit for them. And it's not always the Kegel, right? But the thing that I like about the Kegel that other devices don't have is the down training and the relaxation piece that's baked into it. So we have games that you're playing with your pelvic floor on your phone that are teaching you how to release and relax and what we call kind of drop down the pelvic floor muscles so that you can tap into that sensation when you're stressed out, when you're trying to have sex and it's hurting and you can't insert something, when you're trying to have a bowel movement or release your urine and it just won't come out. That's another one, right? Like shy bladder, people going into, they can't, you said, not pooping in public places, but some people have a hard time even peeing in public places and they can't get the flow started. So this helps you tap into that and learn how to control the muscles, because before you can have strength, you really have to be able to have that motor control connection.
Okay, so I want to recap what I'm hearing, and so everybody's with us. So we can be tight and weak, and in those scenarios, maybe we're experiencing pain with intercourse, constipation, frequent urination, or can't get it out, right? Can't pee or whatever. Okay, loose and weak is that leakage when you sneeze, cough, run, and even poop sneaking out. You mentioned to me the last time we spoke.
Or heaviness in the pelvis.
Okay, great. And so one of the other things that is different here is that there's both like the superficial layers and deeper layers. And a lot of times what people think of is just that superficial piece.
Or actually they're just thinking about the part in the back around the rectum. I see that all the time. So people think like, oh, I can do a Kegel, and they squeeze, and they're just squeezing their butt cheeks together so hard, or their thighs together so hard, or something's happening kind of in the back and the rectum, and they're not actually getting that superficial layer that's around the urethra that needs to cinch. And if you think about a water hose, if you want the water to stop flowing out of the water hose, the best way to do it really is to put your thumb over the water hose and then put a kink in the hose, right? But a lot of people are just putting a kink in the hose when they squeeze the deeper back muscles, and they're not putting the thumb over the front. And that thumb over the front is that tightening of the urethral sphincter in those superficial or more outer layers. So if you were to look at yourself with a mirror, you would see kind of, if you're a vagina owner, you would see the muscles around the opening cinch like a purse string, and maybe that muscle between the opening and the anus kind of pin tuck into the body.
So let's talk about the device. So I will explain for everybody what I received, right? So that, from the lay person, and then you can tell us more. So it's a device where part of it is inserted. Yeah, so for those of you on video, you can see it. So part of it is inserted, part of it stays outside of the body, and then it connects to your phone that has an app. So it is a Bluetooth connection. We'll talk about that in a second. So in the app, you're essentially playing games that is controlled by the contraction and relaxation of
your pelvic floor
the
muscles.
Pelvic floor, right? So admittedly, I first got it, started playing, and was very entertained. Told a few people because I was like, it was actually really fun. And then we started talking about different games and things like that. So before we get into the different games and what somebody might want to start to play with, that was my layperson explanation.
It's a great explanation.
Okay.
A great one.
And then there's also the version that you talked about before where you could sit on it like a bicycle seat into it in a chair versus, other positions.
Inserting something.
So tell us a little bit, because I think people might be like, what? You're having me put something that's Bluetooth in my private areas. Haven't we heard enough about, EMFs and radio waves and all the things? So can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I guess I would just want to start by saying, and whether you believe this or not, that's fine. I always suggest everybody goes and does their own research. So if you have access to like a PubMed library or using Google Scholar or something like that, and you have the ability to read actual research articles, I highly suggest it, and making sure that you're looking at what would be considered good quality evidence. But as of today, I would say the first thing, there's no evidence that wireless technology is going to cause cancer. So we'll say that as a disclaimer. My next thing I'm going to say is that I always take a person-centered approach with everything. So if you're somebody who, let's say you're using the sit-upon one that looks like a bicycle seat, right? And you have low sperm count and testicles, right? And you're concerned about fertility or motility or vitality of your sperm in some way or another, and this stresses you out, go talk to your doctor about it. because they can help to allay some of those fears. But in general, the energy transmission exposure of a cell phone in a pocket is 5 times that of the Bluetooth signal that's utilized by the Kegel boost. And I think the other thing you have to remember is that the average time of use for people is maybe 15 minutes max. And people are typically carrying a cell phone in their pocket or working with a laptop on their lap for hours at a time. So very different exposure rates when it comes to that.
Yeah, which is super helpful because as we talk about all the time, context and nuance is important. And so recognizing both how much and how often, is important there.
Oh, and the other thing I'll say too with the insertable one, the Bluetooth device is actually on the external portion of the device. So there's this piece that you insert into your body and then like a little arm that kind of comes out of the vagina and up and around the pubic bone like this. The Bluetooth device is in that external arm. So you're not putting a Bluetooth device inside of your body. Whereas some other devices, it is actually inside the body.
Perfect. And I will say for everybody, I found the instructions, when you first get the device and you first open the app, the instructions are incredibly helpful. And so to everyone, you see the device, chill, it's all going to be fine. And you guys even include some lube in the package in case you need that. And then
that's actually an important thing. Yeah. You want to use a water-based lube with anything that's silicone. That's just a PSA out there for any products that you purchase that are for play or exercise. Water-based lubes with silicone product.
And I love that you called this exercise because we're going to tie that in a couple minutes with sort of the bigger picture of our health here. With the app and specifically some of these exercises, because we talked about tight and weak versus loose and weak and sort of that up training and down training. What are some of, let's say somebody is tight and weak, which games might they want to start with?
I would probably start with a relaxation exercise. So there's a mindfulness one, and then there's also a breathing one. And literally all you do is insert the device and you can see the screen. It gives you like a little blue line that shows how much you're contracting around the device. You do have to give it a baseline, right? Because this device is reading pressure. So when it's on the outside of the body, then it goes into the body, it's going to send some level of pressure. So you have to zero it out by just hitting a little button on the external arm. Then you're at your baseline, and then you do your breathing or your mindfulness exercise, and you can kind of watch that level of what it's saying is contraction or engagement of the pelvic floor muscles just drop. And I will tell you, it's so sensitive because when I did the game, I was like, I don't have a tight pelvic floor. This is not like, it's not going to drop anywhere because I'm already at zero, right? Like, I'm a pelvic floor therapist. My pelvic floor is perfect. Nope, man, I breathed and it was like, I was like, I did not realize how much tension I was carrying around in my pelvic floor today. Okay. So those are like a good place to just kind of really get started. And then there's an elevator exercise where you start out in the lobby and the elevator is going up floors or down to the basement. And going down to the basement is that really tricky one where you're trying to relax all the way down so that the elevator will drop into the basement. And then, if the elevator is going up levels, you have to be able to get it back down to the lobby or back down to the basement, right? And that's the relaxation piece of it. So that's kind of what I was talking about when it comes to pelvic floor devices out there on the market today is they may have moments where you're supposed to relax, but they're not using it in a true training fashion where that's the goal.
Yeah. And so I started with the elevator, not knowing anything, just playing. And it was certainly a challenge to get it back down to the basement. So one of the things that you said to me was to play the elevator, then go do a couple of the relaxation ones, and then come back to the elevator.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh,
and see how it changes.
Smart. Yeah. So smart. So let's say somebody is on the other side of the spectrum. Maybe they're loose and weak. Which games might they want to start with?
I think you could start with a couple of different games. So there's the pinball game, which I think is just fun because it looks like a pinball machine, and there's little flippers that flap back and forth and kind of hit a ball that goes around the screen. So you just have to be able to squeeze long enough and hard enough to kind of get the flipper to move, which in the beginning is not very much. And so it might kind of just help connect you with, okay, this is how the device works. I squeeze a little bit, something moves, right? And then I can play this pinball game with my pelvic floor. And then I really like for them to look at the moving target game. So moving target is really a way for us to kind of get a baseline of where am I at, because it asks you to squeeze for 10 seconds to start the program. And then it's calibrating an exercise program for you based on that initial squeeze. And then it's giving you a program that you can handle in terms of like how hard you're squeezing or how long you're squeezing for based on that initial squeeze. So you know that the program's not going to be too difficult for you, but it's going to be more challenging than just that pinball game because there are more elements in it in terms of squeezing quickly, multiple times, or long holds, or kind of lifting and lowering. So I like those two games to kind of start.
That's awesome. And then there's also the game remember bricks as a kid where there was like the ball.
It's like Pong kind of. I don't know if I'm allowed to say
Yes.
that, but yeah, it's like there's a little, like a paddle that moves across the screen back and forth, left and right, and the bricks at the top, and then a ball hits and you have to try to eliminate all the bricks. They've got an exercise that's kind of like an asteroid game where the spaceship goes around and tries to kill all the little like alien invaders. That one I think is the hardest, so don't do that one right off that's like level 5 if you want to get there. You may just get frustrated if you try to start with that one right off the bat. And then there's another one that it's interesting. It's called Shapeshift, and it's got these doors that it's like a gate mechanism that open and close. And if you imagine Tetris and how shapes would kind of fall from the ceiling in Tetris, there are different shapes that fall from the ceiling, and you have to relax your pelvic floor muscles to get the gates to open and then squeeze your pelvic floor muscles to get the gates to close. And the idea is you want to kind of trace the shape of whatever's coming through from the ceiling as closely as possible. So, if it's like an oval, you're going to be tight and you're going to get loose, then tight, 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 tight as the oval kind of tries to pass through the gates, which is also kind of another one of those advanced versions of squeezing and relaxing together that you might see similar to the elevator exercise.
And your recommendation is, as you mentioned, like 15 minutes. How often?
It really depends on the person, right? So that first exercise that I talked about, that moving target one, that's about 5 minutes. So for some people, before the 5 minutes is even up, they're going to be like, I'm trying to squeeze and nothing is happening because their pelvic floor muscles are just too weak and they can't handle 5 minutes of exercise. So if you can do a full 15 minutes of exercise, good on you. That's awesome. That's a great place to be looking for and going toward, but not something that we would necessarily expect all people to do.
And I appreciate that you're putting this in the frame of exercise because I think it puts it in a different context for all of us mentally to say these are muscles like any other muscle in our body that require that training to strengthen.
Right. And I think for some people, once they really get it, they can translate that to their strengthening program, their exercise, their squats, their deadlifts, all of those sort of things. But if you never have that connection in the first place, then you may not be contracting your pelvic floor muscles well. I will share, I had a patient who was a CrossFit lifter, and she was having urinary leakage with lifting. And no way was she going to stop CrossFit, right? And that's the other thing. It's like, I'm not going to ask you to stop doing what you're doing. Let's figure out how we can get you strong enough to do the thing you want to do, right? And so we started with the kGoal with her to kind of get that connection back in place. And once she figured out how to do that, she learned how to contract her pelvic floor muscles with the Valsalva. That's a breath holding technique that they'll sometimes use in lifting, like this. And she was able to contract the pelvic floor muscles with that breath technique and increased her, I forgot how much, I wish I'd written down how much, and remember this for this podcast, how much weight she had increased her max lift by, but it was significant and she was extremely surprised. So it's not just something that's like, okay, it's going to keep us from pooping and peeing ourselves or making sex comfortable. It also actually translates to whole body strength and function because our body is not, these muscles in our body, nobody's like, oh, it's just my bicep that does the thing right now. It's like our whole body works together to make actions happen, and the pelvic floor is a piece of that. So I even yoga. If you are a yogi and you're standing on one leg and you're doing like a tree pose, try that and then contract your pelvic floor muscles and see how much more stability you have when you're in that pose. So I think it's an important piece even for longevity. And I mean, I'm going to get like womp here for a second, and I hate to share these things, but pelvic floor health does have an impact for women on their longevity and their ability to live independently longer. So if you're having issues with fecal incontinence, urinary incontinence, maybe you just get up to go to the bathroom a lot of times at night, you're at risk potentially for falling. So we have seen research that shows that people who have pelvic floor weakness also have balance impairments. This research is not saying that they're causal, but they are correlated. I believe that there's a potential causal piece to this actually. But if that's happening for you, then you may be more likely to actually fall. And my own great aunt fell on the way to the toilet in the middle of the night and hit her head
Oh,
and
no.
died as a result of that. My husband's great aunt fell on the way to the toilet because she slipped in her own urine and broke her hip. And then she died as a result of the complications from the hip surgery. So, and these are, and nobody wants to take care of mom when she's pooping and peeing herself at home because it's too much. The diapers are too much. So, if you can take care of those things, you are going to live longer, and not just longer like in a nursing home. You're going to have a better quality of life with that longevity in your life. So sorry, that was my like little sad moment, but I feel like I have to say, because in urinary incontinence is one of that and dementia are like the top two reasons for nursing home admission.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for sharing those stories. I'm sorry for your losses, but I appreciate the information because it is a piece of recognizing how important this is. And so often women, again, because we don't talk about this, or even men, like we don't talk about these things and we just think, well, this is what happens. This is what it is to be a woman. And what I'm hearing is that even before we're at the point of contemplating living alone or assisted care or whatever it is, that even quality of life and the activities that we want to do, if you enjoy running or the weightlifting or whatever it is, and all of this is, excuse the double negative, but not inevitable.
Right. Exactly.
So as we're thinking about this in terms of longevity and as a piece of exercise and movement, I often talk about all of these pillars of health, and I know you do too. So can you speak to some of the other things that maybe we're not realizing are contributing to the pelvic floor weakness when it comes to, nutrition, other movement, stress, sleep, all of those other pieces?
Sure. Yeah. All of those pieces kind of fit together to ensure that your pelvic floor is working the way it's supposed to work, right? So if I'm super stressed all the time, or I'm sitting in a chair with bad posture all the time for work and I'm stressed because those two things are happening, my pelvic floor is probably going to ball up into a little stress ball. You hear all these terms, right? Like don't get your panties in a wad and stuff like that. And it's like, well, that is coming from, it's not your panties getting in a wad, it's your pelvic floor getting in a wad, right? And it's tightening up on you. So actually practicing mindfulness, that's one of the reasons why there's a mindfulness breathing, game on the Kegel app, right? Is because if you are getting the sleep that you need and reducing stress as much as you can, or doing things to combat the stress in your life, it's going to have a positive effect on your pelvic floor muscles. Same thing, like if you are eating like crap, I mean, I don't want to, no judgments here, right? But, if you're having a hard time sticking to healthy choices, you're probably going to see a change in your stool habits, right? And so if you are lending yourself leaning toward constipation, then you get in a place where you start sitting on the toilet and you start straining and you start pushing. Well, if you're pushing and straining a lot with your pelvic floor muscles, that can result in weakness or kind of that dropping of the internal organs that we were talking about, right? So making sure that you're eating in a way and drinking enough fluids and water so that you're hydrated, and getting a mixture of soluble and insoluble fiber so that the pelvic floor muscles are not working so hard to make things happen that should feel very natural for them. And then just stress or just exercise. If you are exercising, you're going to get blood flow to the pelvic floor muscles. They're working in concert with other muscles. They're getting stretched, they're getting strengthened. All of that is really important just for their day-to-day function.
And there are foods that can aggravate the pelvic floor.
I would say foods probably aggravate the organs that sit in the pelvic floor, which then cause you to have kind of the pelvic floor to have a reaction to what's happening to the organs. And that is very dependent on the person, right? Like we know lots of people who have to go on like low FODMAP diets or something to reduce bloating, or they have to go on low acid or low bladder irritant diets, right? So avoiding things like sparkling water. That's the big one, really.
Everyone's going to come at us with that one. So can we just spend another second explaining the sparkling water situation here?
It's the carbonation. Yeah, it's a bladder irritant. So I can't tell you how many times I've had people, they're like, oh, Liz, I'm in the bathroom all the time and I can't figure it out. And then I'm teeing myself all the way to the toilet. You may have a weak pelvic floor that's contributing to the fact that you can't hold your urine back when you're having that moment when you're trying to get to the toilet. But there's a piece of that that's behavioral, and that's that constant drinking of carbonated water. If you can just switch it to a flat, or at least try to alternate a flat water with a carbonation, or think about kind of the additives that you're putting in it. So people like to put those like flavor packs and things in their water, and that can be irritating. So it is challenging too, because sometimes people who have those bladder irritants, bladder irritation issues would love to have electrolytes in their water, because we know that that's really healthy for our body. It's good for your bowels, keeps you hydrated. But sometimes the citric acid and the electrolytes can be problematic, and they need to go to more of a true like magnesium and salt type of formulation that doesn't have so much citric acid in it. But those are all things that we're doing that we're not realizing are having an impact on our organs that our pelvic floor supports.
Absolutely. So anything else in terms of some of those lifestyle things that we can do to also complement the exercise that we're doing with Kegel or otherwise?
I think making, some of the pillars that we just talked about, right? Like making sure that you're keeping moving, that sort of thing. I will say also, like, if you're struggling with bowel movements, or even if you're not struggling with bowel movements, every bowel movement I take, I elevate my feet. I have a squatty potty at home and at work, but I also work in a pelvic floor clinic. So it makes sense for us to have squatty potties at work. But, I don't poop without a squatty potty. So my feet are up elevated on a surface, because that encourages improved relaxation of the pelvic floor muscles when you go to release your bowels. So that's probably like a hot tip that not everybody thinks about or knows about, that you could do to continue to support your pelvic floor. Also, just other little things like don't hover when you pee. I know we're all like germaphobes in public toilets, but if you can put that paper sheet down and go to the bathroom, that's better for your pelvic floor muscles, because you're sitting there and you're trying to use all of your strength to hover. You're basically doing like a chair pose or a squat, and then you're trying to relax your muscles while you're trying to hold yourself up. It doesn't work that way. So then you're forcing your pee or your stool out against contracted muscles, and that's not how the body's supposed to work. And it actually kind of mixes up the signals between the brain and the pelvic floor. When the pelvic floor contracts, it sends a signal to the brain that says, stop peeing or stop pooping, but you're trying to poop and pee, right? So you're kind of getting your wires crossed. So no hovering over toilets, elevate your feet when you go to the bathroom. I'm sure there's many other like hot tips I could provide, but I'll leave it at that for today.
And think of it as the activity, right? Even, with the exercise and the enjoyment and finding and doing it regularly to see the benefits, so that we're doing both the strengthening and I guess it's more control, right? The uptrain and downtrain is about understanding control in both ends of the spectrum, not just overtraining one.
Sure. And then you want to move into strength training, right? Once you've got that strength or resistance training, when you've got that control piece of it down, if that's something that you need.
Yeah, I think this is so helpful, this whole conversation, for a variety of reasons, right? Not the least of which is the more we talk about something, I think we can destigmatize it. Exactly.
Right.
I think the idea of putting it in the context of all of the rest of our movement and the other muscles that we're training, and connecting this to more than the experience of sex, because it is quality of life every single day when it comes to, elimination of any kind and the activities and all of these other pieces that I think, I don't know, why do you think our doctors don't talk about that connection more?
There was actually a study that asked doctors about this, and I don't have all of it memorized, so I apologize if I mess this up, but it was lack of time, lack of knowledge, and I think it was like beliefs that the patient would feel like it was inappropriate or something, right? So it's just not something that we talk about, and we're doing everybody a disservice when we don't, because I was on a call today, and someone said, my doctor has never asked me if sex hurts. My doctor has never asked me if poop hurts. My doctor has never asked me if I'm able to have an orgasm. And I thought, that's true for me too. And I have a really good doctor, and she knows what I do for a living. So maybe she just thinks I'm fine. But before I got her, nobody ever asked me. And so I think that that's part of why these conversations, I think sometimes social media gets a bad rap because people are like, oh, you can't trust that. And it's like, you have no idea how much information I have learned from social media that has been helpful because doctors aren't talking about it or other people aren't talking about it. And that is a forum where everybody can get a little bit of information and they can go out on their own and learn more. And it promotes autonomy. And if you don't have a doctor that's going to talk to you about it, you can take things into your own hands And a pelvic floor device like the Kegel can help you take that control into your own hands. And if you're struggling with it or you're not really sure, do I have a tight, weak pelvic floor or a tight, loose pelvic floor? You can see a pelvic floor physical therapist. The company I work at, Origin, has nationwide virtual physical therapy care under insurance. So it is accessible no matter where you live. You can get somebody and you can talk to them and say, I don't know what's going on, and they can walk you through it, right? But this is all in the service of us learning more about our bodies, being able to take care of ourselves.
1,000%. I love that you brought that up as we wrap this up, because it is independence in our healthcare. It is knowing our own normal so that we know
Yes.
when something is off or different.
Oh my gosh, I'm glad you just said that, because I feel like before we start, we have to say, look at yourself with a mirror. That's something so many people don't do. And I know it's so hard for some people. There's a real aversion to that. But if you feel comfortable doing it, look at yourself with a mirror. I'm going to start working on this with my own daughter, because you don't know what normal is. And then if the doctor says, well, has it always looked this way, or has this always been the case? And you say, well, I don't know. That's really hard. It helps to give your healthcare providers more information if you have more information about yourself.
Well, Liz Miracle, thank you for being here. Tell everybody.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, tell everybody how to connect with you, where to learn more. And we have a discount code for everybody, so I'll share that in a second, but go for it.
Oh, great. I don't actually have any social. If people want to connect with me, I would just go to theoriginway.com. That's our clinic website where you can read blogs that I've written or edited on a million different topics related to pelvic floor health.
And kGoal.com. So your coupon code, everybody, is Trepeck, my last name, Trepeck. That gets you 10% off. We'll put a link in the episode notes for you too, that just by clicking that link, the discount's automatically applied. And keep it easy for all of you. So friends, by the way, we will be back on Wednesday with our regularly scheduled programming, and on Friday with our usual bite-size bonus episode. As always, I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck. Connect with me on Instagram or all social media. I am at Jenn Trepeck, JENNTREPECK. Website is asaladwithasideoffries.com. Pick your platform, send a message, because I truly love hearing from you. And Liz Miracle, thank you again for enlightening us, for having this conversation. And thank you also to Kegel for presenting this episode.
Thank you, Jen.
Absolutely. And until next week, friends, remember, it's all connected. Pee, poop, and your pelvic floor. And we laugh because it's true. And that is fundamentally about making healthcare more accessible and independent. Well, friends, that's it for today's episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. Congratulations for making yourself and your health a priority. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to click subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform. Share us with a friend, and we'll be back next week. Always remember, you deserve it, and you are worth it. Happy healthy.